Australia's blind spot, the war. Nobody thought would affect us. Australia doesn't border Iran. We're not in the Gulf. We don't have troops on the ground. The missiles landing on Dubai aren't landing on Darwin. And yet the war that started on 28th of February 2026 may represent the single largest strategic shock to Australia's economic and defence position in a generation. Here's why nobody's talking about it. Australia has a fuel security problem that successive governments have spent years not solving. The country holds, at any given moment, somewhere between 25 and 50 days of liquid fuel reserves, depending on who's counting and what they're counting. The IEA standard for member nations is 90 days. Australia has never met it. The government has made announcements about fixing this for years. The tanks largely don't exist. Where does Australia's fuel come from? Refined product comes predominantly from Asian refineries, South Korea, Japan, Singapore. Those refineries run on crude oil. A significant portion of that crude oil has, until very recently, moved through the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is now closed, not metaphorically, not partially. Tanker traffic has plunged to a near halt. The IEA has declared it the worst oil supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Asian refineries are scrambling for alternative crude at panic prices. The cost of that scramble gets passed through the supply chain. At the end of that supply chain is an Australian petrol station. This isn't a prediction. The price signal is already moving. The question is how high it goes and how long it stays there, and whether Australia has enough fuel in the ground to absorb the disruption if the strait stays closed for months rather than weeks. The answer, if you're being honest, is probably not. Australia is a treaty ally of the United States. We are inside the INDOPACOM, Indo-Pacific Command, architecture. AUKUS is real, funded, and moving. Here's the tension. The United States military has just committed significant assets to a Middle East conflict with no clear end date. Carriers, aircraft, munitions, logistical capacity, intelligence bandwidth, all of it is oriented toward the Gulf right now. INDOPACOM planners in Canberra and Washington have wargamed this scenario. They know that a sustained Middle East commitment strains the force structure available for Pacific contingencies. They know that the PRC watches US military commitments elsewhere very carefully, looking for windows, looking for moments when the credible deterrence posture in the Western Pacific is thinner than usual. This is one of those moments. It doesn't mean conflict in our region is imminent. It means the risk calculus has shifted in ways that aren't reflected in the news cycle, which is entirely focused on Tehran and the Strait. Australia's defence establishment is aware of this. Whether the political class has caught up is a different question. Here's an irony worth sitting with. Australia is the world's largest or second largest LNG exporter, depending on the year. We pump enormous volumes of liquefied natural gas into Asian markets: Japan, South Korea, China, Taiwan. Qatar, the Gulf's other major LNG supplier, suspended production on the 2nd March after an Iranian drone strike. Qatar supplies 20% of the world's LNG. That supply is now offline. Australian LNG is suddenly the most valuable molecule on the planet. This is good for Woodside's share price. It is good for federal royalty revenue. It is good for the trade balance. It is also somewhat awkward, because the Asian economies now desperately buying Australian LNG at elevated prices are the same economies whose refineries supply Australia's fuel. We are simultaneously a winner and a dependent in the same supply chain shock. The deeper point is this: Australia's energy export wealth and Australia's energy import vulnerability are two sides of the same coin. We have never properly reckoned with what happens when both are activated at the same time. That reckoning is now in progress. Australia's immediate region, Southeast Asia, is absorbing this shock in ways that will shape our strategic environment for years. Indonesia is the world's 4th most populous country. It imports fuel, it imports fertilizer. Both are now subject to significant supply disruption and price pressure. Indonesia's domestic politics are already complicated under Prabowo. Economic stress tends to make complicated politics more complicated. The Philippines hosts US military facilities. It is inside the Indo-PACOM architecture. It is also watching its energy import costs spike at a moment when its economy can't easily absorb them. Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, all net energy importers, all exposed to the price shock moving through Asian refinery markets right now. The concern isn't that Southeast Asia tips into crisis tomorrow. The concern is that sustained economic pressure, elevated energy costs, slowing global growth, a Chinese economy under strain, degrades the stability of governments that have been, broadly, moving in directions favourable to regional order. Australia's foreign policy runs on the assumption of a relatively stable Southeast Asian neighbourhood. That assumption is now under more stress than it has been since the Asian financial crisis. China is the largest single buyer of Gulf oil. 84% of what moved through Hormuz in 2024 was bound for Asia, and China takes the lion's share. The Hormuz closure is therefore an economic shock to China, real, immediate, and not easily absorbed. Chinese growth forecasts are already being revised downward. Capital Economics has the figure falling below 3% if the war drags on. For Australia, China is the largest export market. A slowing Chinese economy means lower demand for iron ore, coal and other commodities that underpin the federal budget. The Australian government does not need to be directly involved in the Iran war to feel it in the budget bottom line. There is a second-order effect here that is harder to model but important to name. A China under economic stress, watching US military assets tied up in the Middle East, reassessing its options in Taiwan, in the South China Sea, in its relationships with regional partners, that China is a different strategic environment from the one Australian policy has been calibrated for. Not a more aggressive China necessarily, but a less predictable one. 3 things that aren't happening at the scale they should be. Fuel reserves. The conversation about 90-day reserves has been had before. It has never produced the infrastructure. This is the moment to actually build it, not announce it, build it. Every week the Strait stays closed is a week that argument becomes harder to ignore. Supply chain diversification, Australia's dependence on Asian refinery capacity for finished fuel products, is a known vulnerability. The pathway out involves either domestic refining, which is expensive and politically uncomfortable, or stockpiling arrangements with allies. AUKUS creates the diplomatic architecture for the latter. Whether it will be used that way is unclear. Regional economic diplomacy. Southeast Asian partners absorbing an energy price shock need to see Australia as a reliable, engaged partner with actual capacity to help. Not just security partnerships, economic ones, LNG supply security, infrastructure investment, agricultural supply chains. The soft power case for Australian engagement in the region is stronger right now than it has been in years. The risk is that Australia watches this war as a spectator, pockets the LNG revenue windfall, and misses the strategic moment. The Iran war is a Middle East story. It is also an energy story, a supply chain story, a Pacific strategy story, and, if it runs long enough, an Australian economic story. The countries that come out of this in the best position will be the ones that treated it as all of those things simultaneously, not the ones that waited to see how it ended. Australia has a window. The question is whether we're paying attention.